Hello everyone, you're welcome to our lecture on banana production. Banana is known as Musa species, that is its scientific name, and it belongs to the family Musaceae. Banana is a major food and cash crop, especially in Uganda, and it is known to have originated from two seeded and wild species, that is Musa acuminata and Musa balbisiana, and these are all natives of South Asia. The crosses of the above species formed diploids, triploids, and tetraploids, and these are double A, AB, triple A, double AB, single A, double B, AABB, triple A, B, and then A, triple B. So the cultivars that are commonly grown in Uganda are categorized as follows. The first one is the cultivars of the East African coast and nearby islands, and here we have the squarindizi or the dessert bananas. Those are the sweet bananas that we normally find on the market. Then we find chisubi or the brewing banana. These ones almost look like the dessert bananas, but for them they have slightly bigger fingers. Then we have the dessert banana, which is the bogoya. Then we have the kainja or the brewing banana. This is normally used by those who make the local brew from bananas. And then we have the cooking or brewing type called chivuvu, and this one is normally boiled when it is ripe. But then you find some regions where they cook it when it is raw, but it is not as tasty when it is raw as when you wait for it to ripen. Then category B is for the plantains, where we have the gonja for roasting, cooking or frying. So it can be consumed in many ways. Some people just roast it, others cook it, and others fry it. And some people have even reached an extent of frying it, packaging it, and selling it either on the local market or exporting it. Then we have the East African highland bananas, and these are the cooking bananas that we normally find people cooking and consuming. So now let's look at the economic importance of bananas, or how they are utilized. So one is that banana is food and income source. So we find so many cultures in our country consuming banana, and almost all restaurants that you'll find within Uganda will have bananas prepared. But also there are farmers who produce the bananas and sell them to earn some income that sustains their households. Then we have the types that are used for juice extraction, and then we also have types that are used to make alcoholic drinks. Then we also have the fiber that is used for thatching houses. Children can also use them for making toys. Then we have the dry leaves, which are used either on cultural functions, and then others also use them during political campaigns. Now let's look at the ecological requirements for banana production. The first one is that bananas require very high amounts of rainfall, which are over 1,200 millimeters per year, and this rainfall has to be well distributed. So preferably for proper production of bananas, one would require between 1,500 to 2,500 millimeters of well distributed rainfall per year. And then the optimum temperature for production is 27 degrees Celsius. For high altitudes, banana production doesn't do very well since having very cold conditions would lengthen the shooting time. Then also areas that are very windy, areas that get a lot of wind wouldn't be appropriate for banana production because of toppling, especially when you plant tall cultivars, or when the area is infested with weevils. So if there's a lot of wind that is blowing, you'll find most of the plants are falling because the roots are already weak. They are affected by nematodes, and also the plant is affected by weevils. Banana production also requires well-drained loam soils with high humus content. So for you to achieve from banana production, you would require very fertile soils, or you have to supplement the fertility of your soil with the use of fertilizers, especially organic manure. So the first agronomic practice is land preparation. You're supposed to carry out bush clearing and uproot any tree stumps, especially when you're choosing to grow bananas in a virgin area which has never been used for production. You're supposed to do the first deep plowing to loosen the hard surface. This is towards the rainy season. And then you're also recommended not to do bush burning. So if there are residues that you have found within the area and you clear them, this should be used either as mulch or to make compost manure, which can be used in growth of the plants that you're going to grow. Still under land preparation, we prepare the holes, and these holes are supposed to be at least 2 feet deep and then 3 feet wide. Okay, now this is quite a wide pit, but it is necessary because it would allow proper root expansion and retention of water, because remember we've said banana plants require a lot of water for them to grow well. So a wider pit is required because, one, it will help the roots to freely expand, and then two, it will help in retaining water that will be utilized by the plant during its early growing stages. Then when you're planting, you will need to mix the topsoil with the manure, and that is what you put first. So when you're making the hole, you ensure that the topsoil is put separately, and then the subsoil, which is normally deep red in color, is also separated, because once the time for planting comes, you will require the topsoil, which normally has some good amount of humus. Then for the spacing is supposed to be 3 meters by 3 meters. So between the rows we use 3 meters, and within the rows we also use 3 meters. So it is important for us to follow this recommended spacing because, one, it will help us ensure optimum plant population. So if a farmer is investing in commercial farming, it is important because every space matters in production. Then when you use the right spacing, you minimize competition for resources like moisture, even space when the plant is growing. So the competition for sunlight is reduced because every plant has enough space that has been provided for its growth. And then the sun will easily penetrate, and this will also help reduce the infestation of certain pests and diseases. And then proper spacing also allows proper management practices like mulching and harvesting, because one is able to pass through the garden with ease without destroying any other plant. Then after land preparation, the second agronomic practice is variety selection, or selecting planting materials. You can use improved varieties that have been conventionally bred through our research stations in the country, or if you're not from Uganda, of course there are research organizations that breed varieties that are resilient to the existent challenges or stresses. So most of the varieties that we have in our country have been either bred to ensure that there is increased resistance to certain diseases and certain pests, and also to ensure that they have higher yield. So some of the examples of the improved cultivars that are available at Kawanda include Cabana 6H, we have Cabana 7H, we have narrow banana or narrow band 3, narrow band 4, but you can also choose from the local varieties which have specific traits that the market appreciates. So we have Mwazirume, we have Chibuzi, we have Mpologoma, we have Nachitembe, we have Musakara, and so on. So these varieties have attributes ranging from better taste. Some are known to be soft, so the market prefers them as cooking bananas. Others have bigger fingers, so people find them easier to peel. So it depending on the market that you're producing for, you can be guided to choose the best variety to plant. And if you choose to plant suckers from the garden, you're recommended to use the sword suckers, which look like this, and not the water suckers. Okay, so if you're choosing from your plantation, you always ensure that you choose the sword suckers and not the water suckers. Okay, but if you have some funds, it is highly recommended that you go for the tissue culture bananas, because these ones are clean and you're sure that when you plant them you will not have any issues of diseases from a specific garden, because they are produced from a clean environment to ensure that there is no infestation of diseases and pests. Okay, but when you choose to use the sword suckers, before planting, you're supposed to ensure that you clean the suckers by pairing. Okay, so you remove all the dead tissues, you remove the roots, and ensure that these suckers are clean, because we know that some of these roots would harbor nematodes or eggs for particular pests that you can take to another field. Then when you're cutting the sucker, you ensure that you cut the comb at the base to ensure that you have a flat base. Okay, and then you make a slanting cut on top of the sucker. So this is the sucker, but below it we have a comb. So you ensure that when you're cutting the shoot off, you make a slanting cut. And this slanting cut should be at most 45 centimeters from the base. Okay, so from the comb you ensure that you leave 45 centimeters, then you cut off the shoot in a slanting manner so that you avoid accumulation of water when you plant the sucker. Then when you're going to plant, you ensure that you mix the topsoil. Remember we said you separate the topsoil from the lower soil. So you mix the topsoil with organic manure, well decomposed organic manure. This organic manure can be compost manure, it can be animal manure, or any other organic manure which is fully decomposed. So you mix 2 basins of that organic manure with the topsoil, and this is what you pour first within the hole that we made. Okay, but when we are rehabilitating the garden, when the plantation is already established and you just want to improve your production, then you can apply 2 basins around the mat. Okay, so if this is a banana plant and probably it has suckers around, so around that mat, that's what we call a mat, so around that mat you can apply 2 benzines by ring method. Okay, or you can choose to apply in a pit that you'll put between 4 plants. So you get a pit between 4 plants between the rows, and that's where you pour the manure and cover it, and as the roots grow, they'll feed from that manure that you have placed there. But when you're using the ring method, ensure that at least you put the manure 2 feet away from the stool to avoid scorching of the plant. And alternatively, you can use water troughs or basins in between 4 neighboring plants. This is what we've talked about, that you can choose 4 neighboring plants, and between the rows you can put water troughs or basins or pits where you put the manure, and the plants are able to feed from the same place. However, if you choose to use inorganic fertilizers, you can use, especially if you choose to use organic fertilizers, you can also apply in a ring method 2 feet away from the stool or 60 centimeters away from the stool. And here you can use muriate of potash, where I use 95 grams per mat. Okay, and this is done 2 times in each rainy season. So if we have 2 rainy seasons a year, those are 4 times. If not that, you can use 120 grams of NPK together with 92 grams of muriate of potash per stool. Okay, still this can be applied twice in every rainy season. Okay, or you can apply 165 grams of potassium nitrate together with 36 grams of muriate of potash per stool. This is very important because proper banana growth would require a lot of nitrogen and potassium. So at planting, remember we've been going through fertilizer application, but mainly because at planting we would require some application of fertilizer. So if you're applying at planting, the best to use is organic manure, which we have said you mix with the topsoil and you put before you put the suckers. Okay, so at the onset of rains, that's when you plant, and after planting the sucker, you cover it with a thin layer of soil of about 3 to 4 centimeters for easy sprouting, because if you over cover it, it may take long to come out, yet you want to utilize the first rains. Okay, so planting in time would enable you to benefit from the nitrogen flush, and also reduce competition between the weeds and the plants, and also enable you avoid some stubborn pests or pest incidences that you would get when you plant late. The other agronomic practice is gap filling. So if you realize that there is need for gap filling, especially when you have missing plants, and this is usually caused by wrong spacing or death of some plants, you're supposed to do a gap filling. Okay, so when you're gap filling, still avoid planting materials that are infested with pests and diseases, or planting materials that are coming from gardens that are already having pest and disease problems. Okay, so if you're meant to gap fill because some of the plants have died because of the banana bacterial wilt, you ensure that you first give that place 6 months before you put in another plant. Okay, so if you're sure that there was banana bacterial wilt that killed that plant, leave the planting hole empty for at least 6 months before you do gap filling. Okay, and when you're gap filling, avoid short varieties being mixed with tall varieties, and you use them for gap filling to avoid unfair competition between the plants. You can also do intercropping in banana, and the major crop that is used is coffee. So if you're to intercrop with coffee, for every 2 lines of banana that you plant 1 line of coffee, and this is when banana is the major crop in that garden. And when intercropping with beans, you're supposed to plant in rows, and when the time for flowering of beans comes, you're supposed to de-leaf most of your plants and ensure that you have at least less than 7 leaves in order to reduce on the shading, so that your beans can perform well. Now this is when the plantation is fully established, but if you still have the suckers when you've just planted, you can plant your beans and harvest. But if the plants have more leaves and they have fully established, then you have to do de-leafing so that the other annuals are not so much affected by shading. Okay. Then the other agronomic practice is desuckering, which is the removal of suckers with the aim of maintaining optimum plant population per mat. So it is very important that you use the right tools. It's good to use either a desuckering spear or a mattock, but if you don't have this, you can also choose to use a hoe, but you need to take precautions so that you don't injure the remaining plants on the mat. So you should note that this should be done carefully, like I've said, not to injure the other plants, because these injuries might be a source of infection in case there is any disease outbreak. So for normal suckering varieties, you need to maintain 3 plants per mat, and for over suckering varieties, you need to maintain up to 6 plants per mat. But for most of the varieties we have for the cooking type, they are normally normal suckering varieties, and we normally recommend leaving 3 plants per mat. The other agronomic practice is forking, and this refers to loosening of the soil around the mat using a forked hoe. Forking is important because it improves infiltration of water into the soil. It reduces runoff and thus controls soil erosion within the garden, and it also enables the plant to easily access externally applied nutrients from manure or fertilizers. However, to reduce root damage, you're supposed to dig once at each point and avoid dragging the soil, because when you drag the soil, you'll also be dragging the roots. And then forking should be done when applying manure and mulching, or when the soil is compacted, but preferably you should do it close to or at the onset of rains. Then the other agronomic practice is mulching, and mulching refers to covering the soil with plant residues for better water retention and reduce soil erosion, but it also helps in suppressing weeds in the garden. So if you do proper mulching, you will reduce the requirements for weeding. So a good field should be fully mulched, what we call blanket mulching, and the thickness of the mulch you use should be 8 to 15 centimeters, and this should be sufficient to hold enough water within the soil. So mulching materials can include dry crop residues. For example, if you have maize stovers, if you have rice straw, you might have napier grass, or any other grass can work as good mulch. But even when you're But even when you're pruning, the banana leaves, the old banana leaves that you remove from the plant, can also be used to supplement the mulch that you apply. So remember that when you're using the banana residues, which is what we call self-mulch, you should ensure that the pseudostems are chopped properly to ease decomposition. It is also recommended that when you're mulching, you remove weeds, for example, the couch grass, Commelina species or wandering Jew, and nut grass, because these ones multiply very fast. So if you don't remove them, there will be a source of new weeds. Then you should avoid using residues from plants that have been affected by pests or diseases. When you're mulching, ensure that you place the mulch at least 1.5 to 2 feet away from the mat, like what you see in the picture, because when this mulch is decomposing, it releases heat, which can result into scorching of the plants. But again, it can also be a harboring place for certain pests. So avoid doing it so close to the plant. And then it is also known that when you mulch too close to the mat, the roots also tend to come up towards the surface, and this weakens the plant, making it susceptible to toppling, especially in places where there's a lot of wind. In newly established fields, you're recommended to apply mulch around the plant, or spot mulching, especially if it is a dry season, so that you're able to retain water within the soil. And the agronomic practice that is recommended is comb removal, and this helps in destroying all breeding grounds for weevils. So if the harvested comb is heavily damaged, you should cut off the tissue that is damaged and leave the clean part to support the mat. So the removed combs should be cut into pieces to ensure that they quickly dry, so that the eggs and larvae of weevils are destroyed. And the other agronomic practice is pruning, and this improves air circulation in the field, provides internal mulch, it reduces the spread of black sigatoka, because it spreads a lot in places that are not having enough air circulation. And then it also prevents harboring of banana weevils, and it also makes the garden look very attractive. So if you realize that the garden is filled with plants that have a lot of banana leaves, a lot of sheath, and a lot of dry leaves, you should always remove them, because they are always breeding grounds for diseases and pests. We also have another practice called male bud removal, and this one is used by using a forked stick. Okay, it's not recommended to use sharp objects, because they can be a way of spreading diseases, especially spread of the banana bacterial wilt. So the male bud is very wasteful, because it acts as a nutrient sink. So instead of the nutrients going to the fingers of the fruit, they'll instead be accumulated within the male bud. And the other thing is that removal of this male bud also prevents or controls the spread of banana bacterial wilt, like I've said. So for you to do it, you should survey the last cluster on the bunch. Okay, so when the sheath of the last cluster has dropped off, that's when you should remove this male bud. The other agronomic practice is related to water management. So for you to manage water within the field, especially during heavy rains, you're supposed to make large trenches or gullies within your garden, and this should be running in the direction of the slope, or they should be around the field to drain off large volumes of water. So you should make these troughs or basins close to the edge of the field to break the speed of the running water and serve as water reservoirs for the water that will be required by the plants. Okay, so when you're making these gullies or trenches, you should ensure that they are deep enough, deep at least up to 2 feet, and you should always put bands in order to keep on reducing the speed of the water. So still in water management, we should practice what we call the fanya chin and the fanya ju. The fanya chin is put at the upper side of the field, and there when you're making the trench, you ensure that the soil is put at the lower side of the trench in order to harvest water into the field. Then the last trench down the field should be the one where you have the soil put on the upper side. And in order for you to stabilize them, you should plant elephant grass, or you can use some agroforestry shrubs like Caliandra, so that you prevent runoff of the soil that you put on both sides. Then now let's look at the common pests and their management. The first one are the banana weevils, and in the local language in central Uganda they call the weevils kayovu. Now the weevils burrow into the comb and multiply, and then the larva keeps on feeding on this comb. Okay, so for you to prevent the spread of banana weevils, you should ensure that you use clean planting materials, or use tissue culture bananas or micro-propagated planting materials. And then in absence of these clean planting materials, you should select vigorous or healthy suckers from the garden. Remember we said we choose sword suckers. Then after digging them out, you should trim the comb of the suckers to remove all infested parts. Then after removing all infested parts from the sucker, you should dip these trimmed suckers in boiling water for 20 to 30 seconds to kill the leg. Then after cleaning this comb, you should dip the trimmed suckers into boiling water for 20 to 30 seconds to kill the eggs and the larva, or in cold water overnight to suffocate the larva and the eggs. But the most effective one is using boiling water. Or if not that, you can dip the suckers in a neem solution, which is 20%. And here, for you to mix properly, use 2 ml in 8 ml of water, and you leave these suckers overnight. The other way of preventing weevils in the field is ensuring good husbandry practices, so that you increase the plant tolerance and minimize the risk of infection within your field. You can also use traps, especially after harvest. You cover the remaining part of the pseudostem, and then the following morning you can come and check, and you manually destroy all the weevils that would have collected there. For direct control, and manually kill the weevils that are trapped. And here, when you're making your trap, you use 2 feet long split pieces of the pseudostem, and you use them to cover near the stool or around the stool. So you cut these pieces and put them around the stool, and you can even also cover the remaining part of the pseudostem. And then you come and check after 1 to 2 days, and you kill all the weevils that would have collected. You can also apply 50 to 100 grams of neem seed powder around each stool every 4 months. Or you can make a concoction of tithonia, Mexican marigold, blackjack, ash, and animal urine or human urine, and this can be fermented for 14 to 21 days. So after this, you dilute at a ratio of 1 to 2, and then you apply twice per season on your plants. Then we also have nematodes, and these nematodes can be prevented by using land which was not previously used to grow bananas. We can also do fallowing for 6 to 12 months. So if you had a field with bananas, before you plant them again, you fallow that land for 6 to 12 months. You can also do deep plowing at least 1 foot in the dry season to expose the nematodes that are remaining or that are harbored in the soil. You should also use clean planting materials, and here tissue culture bananas are the best. Or you can also trim the combs of the suckers that you have picked from the field, and you put them in boiling water for 20 to 30 seconds so that you kill off all the surviving nematodes before you plant. Direct control, you can use the concoction of tithonia, Mexican marigold, ash, blackjack, and urine, but sometimes you can also put pepper if you have. You can also control the nematodes by ensuring that you practice field hygiene. Then you also support the plants which are affected with stakes so that you avoid toppling. There are also some resistant varieties which have been tested by Naro. So you can use Cabana 6 or Kiwangazi. So these ones have been tested and they have been proved to be less susceptible to the nematodes within the field. Or you can plant trap crops like Sesbania, or you can use host cover crops like Desmodium planted around the field to reduce the nematode population within your garden. So for you to know that you have these nematodes within the field, always scout for the following symptoms: dead roots on combs 6 months after planting, toppling of banana plants and exposing of the roots. So if you find banana plants which are toppling in your field, then you should know that there are issues of nematodes. If you see that there is stunted growth of the plants and there is delayed fruiting or reduction in the size and number of leaves, then you should also suspect that you have nematodes. Let's now look at the diseases, the common banana diseases. We have banana bacterial wilt, and for you to know that the plant is affected by banana bacterial wilt, you'll find yellowing of leaves, okay, within the garden. Then if the plants have already formed fruits, you will find ripening, immature ripening bunches, and then you will also find a yellow ooze. When you cut the pseudostem, a yellow ooze will come out on the surface of the pseudostem. For prevention, you should use clean tissue culture plantlets. You should remove the male flower using a forked stick because this can also be a source of infection, especially through insects. Then restrict movement of planting materials or products into your field. Also avoid use of tools that are not sterilized, especially if these tools have worked from another garden, or if you have used the tools on an infected plant. So before using this tool on your plants, you should ensure that you use a flame to sterilize it, or you can use jik that has been diluted. We mix jik with water in a ratio of 1 ml to 9 ml of water. You can also remove the infected plant on the mat, and if the disease has just been introduced and you carefully do that, then you can wipe it out from your garden. Then you suspend desuckering and deleafing with farm tools in the event that you see a plant with signs of banana bacterial wilt, at least for 3 to 4 months. Then we also have fusarium wilt, which is also a very serious disease in bananas. The signs include bright yellow older leaves, which break at the peduncle and they hang on the pseudostem. Then when you cut the pseudostem, there are always black stains on the vesicular bundles. Then you can also see splitting of the sheath, especially at the base of the plant. So for prevention, you can also use tissue culture bananas or micropropagated bananas, because you'll be sure that they are clean. You should also restrict movement of suckers or plant parts from areas that have infection. And because this disease is soil borne, you should avoid movement of the soil, for example on vehicles, or even the soil that comes with the tools like the hose, and on footwear. So you should always ensure that you use clean tools within the field. For direct control, you should always rogue and destroy infected plants, and then you can also burn the residues to ensure that the inoculum is destroyed. You can also use resistant varieties, for example the Cavendish types and the Fia bananas, and you should avoid planting susceptible cultivars like the desert bananas in places which have a history of fusarium wilt. We also have black sigatoka, and this is a foliar disease which spreads through air, and this causes red-brown streaks that are parallel to the vein on the leaves. Now these streaks on the leaves expand and become noticeable on the upper surface of the leaf. They also darken and later develop gray, slightly sunken centers with black margins. So for you to prevent black sigatoka, you should enhance the nutrition through use of manure, fertilizers, and you should also ensure that you mulch. You can also use resistant varieties. Also carry out timely pruning when the leaves are dry. Apart from the diseases, we also have potassium deficiency in bananas, and in the local community they call it olunyu. For you to know that there is potassium deficiency, you'll find necrosis in the infant stages of the plant, and drying and breaking of the leaves at the petioles. For you to control this deficiency, you should control erosion within the garden by trenching and mulching. Then you should also apply a lot of farmyard manure or animal manure, and you should reuse crop residues in the plantation. You should use crop residues within the plantation. And then for direct control, you can use muriate of potash at a rate of 60 grams per plant. Then for harvesting, when you're harvesting, take care to prevent the bunch from falling heavily on the ground, because when it falls, the clusters might break off and the quality will be affected. So you make the cut, which is not too deep on the pseudo stem, and allow the bunch to descend slowly under its own weight. Then cut off the bunch and reduce the pseudo stem to at least 1 foot in the ground to enable translocation of nutrients into other suckers. And then after a month, you can come back and then cut the remaining pseudo stem at the collar region and cover it with soil. At that level, if you realize that the comb is affected, then you should also do comb removal. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, please raise them so that we can discuss them.